Hello and welcome to Lecture 3 of Unit 5. This is over Chapter 7, Section 3. In previous lectures we have looked at the Battle of Saratoga, which we called a turning point in the war. And it's a turning point in the war, if you remember, because it is what gets the French and the Spanish involved and for us, the Americans, to have allies in the war. And that is a turning point because we get some more support, and that just helps us fight this war. We also looked at some naval battles and things like that with John Paul Jones. But in this lecture, we are going to be looking at battles that take place inside the United States, how that plays out, a shift kind of in the strategy of the British, and the outcome of all of those things. After 3 years of fighting, the British were no closer to victory. They did not have enough troops. Regular station troops in the colonies to fight, effectively. And in 1778, the British decide to move the war to the south because they are hoping to get more support from the Southerners and escape slaves. So they're hoping that if they move the war to the south, they can get some civilian help from the colonists living around in that area, because they think that the Southerners, there will be more loyalists in the south. And that's true, but they might have miscalculated the number of loyalists, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. So at first this kind of works out for them. In December in 1778, the British took the city of Savannah along with most of Georgia. So that's a large city in the south. The British have captured it, and their southern strategy is working a little bit. Along with the British, after they take Savannah, the British then handed the Americans two crushing defeats, which took out most of the Americans' southern army. We will look at both of these defeats, but at the end of these defeats, when the Americans are beaten, the American spirits are at a new low. They are, they are crushing defeats. They are huge. They basically wipe out entire armies of American soldiers, and the spirits are very low. The first battle that we look at is Charlestown, which is the South's largest city. And at the end of that battle, the Americans are forced to surrender to Lord Cornwallis. And Lord Cornwallis is the British general who now controls the British forces. So he is kind of in charge of the British forces. He is kind of like the British George Washington. He is the person that's in the charge of the army, commanding the army, and all of that kind of stuff. This is Lord Cornwallis. Yep. All right. Charlestown was the worst defeat during the war, and for the Americans. And after this, the Congress decides that they need to change leadership in the Southern Army, so they put Horatio Gates in, and he is supposed to form a new Southern Army, but things do not end well for him. He adds a whole bunch of untrained militia, and these people were in no condition to fight. Gates and his troops ran into the British outside of Camden. So at the Battle of Camden, the Americans are in no condition to fight, and what ends up happening is that most of these untrained militia panic, run, and eventually even Horatio Gates himself runs away, kind of deserting. And if you remember back, Horatio Gates he's put in charge of this because he has won a very important battle before, and he is actually the person that was in charge of running the Battle of Saratoga for the Americans. So he won the Battle of Saratoga for the Americans, so he is kind of supposed to be good at what he's doing. And he gets there and, he puts a whole bunch of untrained people out there, and they panic and run away, and he freaks out and runs away too, instead of, seeing the fight end to the bitter end almost. And if a general is not, sticking around and panics and runs in the middle of a battle, do you think he's going to keep his job? No, he is not. He's going to get fired, and we're going to see what happens after that. But Horatio Gates, the one thing that I would focus on is that Camden right here is Horatio Gates' last battle. So Camden, he moves down from the north and goes to Camden and gets defeated and panics and runs, and that's his last battle. The guerrilla warfare, this is important because the countryside is filled with rebels, and it basically leads to the British not being able to get any messages out and keep in touch with their base. The British would send messengers and say, hey, we need this many supplies or this many extra troops because the Americans are moving in on us. That message would get sent out on horseback or on foot, or some way they would start carrying it. And as they were carrying it to base, they would be attacked. The British would be attacked by Americans that were just in the woods, and they would jump out and start fighting them. And that means that message is never going to get back to the base, so that means that those troops or supplies or reinforcements or whatever never get back to help the British that send that message. That's a big issue. I mean, if you're not getting the reinforcements and supplies that you need, you're not going to be doing very well in the war. Another reason why guerrilla warfare is important is because the countryside was a very dangerous place for the British Army. They had trouble just marching from one place to another because along the way they were sure to be attacked by a militia group of Americans that were just hiding out in the woods waiting for British to come by. And, when you're constantly having to fight like that, that's a tough situation to be in. So Horatio Gates is defeated at Camden, and Congress decides to put Nathaniel Greene in charge of the war. This is Nathaniel Greene right over here. And Nathaniel Greene is a better strategist than Horatio Gates was in the Southern Army. And what that means is he's better at kind of, drawing up a good plan to beat the British. So what Nathaniel Greene does is his goal is to try to make Cornwallis chase him around the South and kind of get worn out, and then meet in a traditional battle. The lines of, you got the ranks of each people, and they're going to shoot at each other, and straight lines and all this kind of stuff. This traditional battle. So that actually ends up happening, and it actually works, because when Greene and his army meet Lord Cornwallis in the traditional battle, the Patriots actually end up winning. And that's not something that always happened. The Patriots were not as good at these traditional battles as the British were, and any win that they can get in one of these traditional battles is a big deal. So Nathaniel Greene, put in charge, wins the battle. The battle that he actually wins is the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. In this battle, Lord Cornwallis, the reason that he loses is because he loses so many men to the Patriots that there's such high British casualties that he has to retreat back to the coast. When he gets back to the coast, he sits there, he looks at his army, he realizes that they are exhausted, that they are not getting any help from the citizens around them, and that was their whole plan. The reason that the British went down into the South is because they thought that there would be more loyalists. They thought that they would be able to help them. And he gets there, and he's been defeated. He's retreated back to the coast, and he sits there and looks around, and he realizes that there were just simply less loyalists in the South than the British had thought. And because of this, the British Southern strategy has completely failed. They've moved down there. They thought that they would be able to take some of the big cities and win a whole bunch of battles and all this kind of stuff. But really what ends up happening is, they're just outnumbered by the amount of support that the Patriots have in the South, even though there are quite a few loyalists in the South. The end of the war. So Cornwallis has retreated back to the coast, and he goes to Virginia, and he sets up base at the coastal city of Yorktown. And this decision to set up base in Yorktown would prove to be his fatal mistake. Cornwallis's decision to set up base at Yorktown gave Washington an opportunity to trap the British on the peninsula that Yorktown sat on. And I'm going to show you a map of why Yorktown is such an inconvenient place to set up a base. But if you imagine a peninsula, if you are set up at the end of that peninsula, you can't go anywhere besides out to the water or forward to attack your enemy. So you can't easily retreat without having a whole bunch of ships. And that doesn't work out for them either, to be able to retreat like that, because Washington and the Americans joined forces with the French, and the French are actually preventing the British supply ships from reaching into Yorktown. So now not only can they not retreat, they cannot get any supplies to even help, fight back. They are basically just sitting ducks and kind of wasting away from not having any supplies, and it's not a good situation for the British. The British set up redoubts, which are small forts where they could keep cannons. They would be able to shoot the Patriots, but the Patriots would not be able to shoot them. But this also backfires on the British, because the Patriots would capture these small forts, and then they were able to safely move their cannons closer to the British because they would shoot them, and the British couldn't shoot back because the Patriots were using the forts that the British had built. So the Patriots and French are doing all these things, bombarding the British, and on October 19th, 1781, Cornwallis has surrendered, and this pretty much ends the war. So the Battle of Yorktown is the last battle of the Revolutionary War. So you need to remember that. That's why I'm underlining it so much in all of this. So you need to remember that. Battle of Yorktown, last battle of the Revolutionary War. The Patriots have won. So Patriots win the Revolutionary War. Shocker. Okay, Yorktown. It's right here. If you look, it is surrounded by water at every point. And then the only entrance into this harbor from the outside is this area right here. And these blue ships are French ships that are preventing the British from coming in to give them supplies in Yorktown. So they cannot get in. The Washington's forces and the American forces can travel down through here, set up ships here and cannon and all this kind of stuff, and then send troops in this way. And it's just, they're stuck. They're sitting ducks basically, and that's why they have to surrender. That's why it's such a big mistake on Cornwallis's part. Why the Americans win. This is a chart on page 218. Whoa, let's go. Page 218. There are American strengths and British weaknesses. So I'm going to show you these right here, but if you want to copy them down really effectively, you need to go to the book in page 218, and that's to look all of this stuff up. So the American strengths. Patriots fought for their lives. There was, they were fighting for something that meant something, their lives. It's what it means the most to them. They had lots of local support from the local militias, the patriots that live, around, that come out of the woods and burn the crops and drive off the cattle and all that kind of stuff. American generals learned from their mistakes, which means that they didn't keep making the same mistakes over and over again. They adapted to the changing style of the war. Washington inspired his troops, a lot of morale. They had allies, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch. They all helped the Americans. The Americans fought close to home. That means that they can get messages easily transferred. They can get supplies a little bit easier. They know the territory. And also they had local militia support. That's more troops, basically. More people fighting. More people with guns, not regular troops. They have almost 250,000 people fighting for the Patriots. So try to remember that number when we look at the weaknesses for the Patriots. I'll give you a little bit of time to copy that down, just a second. Okay, so like I said, page 218, you can get these at the end after I go through the British weaknesses. British weaknesses: they fought for pay instead of fighting for their lives. That it doesn't mean as much. I mean, yeah, money's great and everything, but if you had to choose between getting $20 and dying, getting $20 or not dying, you'd probably, not die. They were unprepared for the popular support of the Patriots, like the people burning the crops and driving off the cattle and all that kind of stuff. They were very overconfident, their generals were. They did not learn from their mistakes. They underestimated Washington and the troops. They had no allies. They did not have the French and the Spanish coming in. When they would need backup or reinforcements or more supplies, they would have to send those orders all the way to England, and that takes a very long time to get those orders all the way to England and then get all the supplies back to America. So they ran low on a lot of things that they needed, and they only had about 54,000 regular fighting troops in America. That means that's the only people that they had fighting. The Americans had a smaller armed force with an army, a continental army. We're talking, roughly 20,000 people for the Americans. But the Americans also had that 250,000 just regular citizens that were out there fighting. So you have this, but you have the 20,000, but you have to also add this amount to all of these people together fighting these 54,000 British troops, which, is a pretty remarkably high number fighting them. And these are, the strengths and the weaknesses together are why the Americans won the war. And that chart on page 218 is really important for a lot of C-level activities, for a lot of B-level activities, and even probably the A-level activities. So I would go to that to copy all of that down if you didn't get some of the strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, there you go. We will talk about the cleaning, the tidying up of the war, and the closing of the loose ends and the treaties and all that kind of stuff in the next lecture.